Never, ever promote an ask twice person. Don't promote an ask 3 times or 4 times person. Don't even consider it. It might be tempting. They might be very reliable. But I'm telling you right now, when you're looking at who to promote, there's 2 main criteria that I look at if we're going from frontline staff to frontline supervisor. Firstly, only ever promote an ask once person. Welcome to IDD Leader, where human services leaders grow their impact, lead with heart, and build the workplaces our field deserves. I'm your host, Nate Beers. Let's dive in. Here on the IDD Leader podcast, April is, drumroll please, Stronger Supervisors Month. We actually have a monthly theme. I haven't done that before. We're giving it a shot. Stronger Supervisors Month. Every episode this month is all about helping you build stronger supervisors at your organization. If you are a supervisor, it's also about you trying to level up your own leadership as a supervisor. And today's episode kicks things off with talking about building a leadership pipeline. I'll say more about that in a moment, but I want to just let you know, if you resonate with the things I'm about to share, check out iddleader.com/leadership. There is a new cohort about to close in May or get started in May, so you need to sign up sooner than later, for a bunch of frontline supervisors across multiple organizations who want to, or their organization wants them to, grow in their ability to manage people. Most frontline supervisors were promoted because they were the best DSPs, the best frontline workforce people, and they weren't necessarily because they were great at leading others or managing others. It's a completely different skill set. And so then all of a sudden it's like, wait, I got to tell someone how to perform their job differently? I didn't have to do that before. Or manage a team meeting? Or, there's like all these situations when it comes to managing people that can feel awkward or uncomfortable or difficult. And frankly, most of those don't get trained on because it doesn't show up in compliance trainings. And if there is 1 or 2 trainings in your learning management software, it's usually kind of about like, different people on your team have different styles of communication. And so be aware of that, as opposed to like, hey, 2 teammates are disagreeing with each other. What are you supposed to do about it? Or that person keeps never turning in their paperwork, but they're your best worker ever when it comes to how they interact with individuals being served. How do you handle that situation? Well, good news, there's specific tools for every single one of those. This episode and every episode in April is all about trying to give you those tools, but I want to encourage you, if the supervisors at your organization, or frankly, if you as a boss or supervisor would benefit from strengthening those types of skills, check it out. Leadership Lab, iddleader.com/leadership. The goal here is to reduce turnover, reduce headaches, save you money and time. And at the end of the day, everybody wins. When the supervisors are confident and competent, everybody wins because they build teams nobody ever wants to leave. We're talking about moving beyond the accidental supervisor, which is when someone gets promoted kind of by default, or maybe it's because they were the longest tenured person, or, oh no, we had someone else leave from our, a frontline supervisor left, or maybe they even promoted themselves. Now there's this vacancy. How are we going to fill it? And most human services agencies, there is a system, there's a pipeline that's happening, but most of the time it's not been designed very intentionally. So I want to cover mainly 2 topics, which is what criteria should matter most when you're looking at who to promote. And then secondly, what can you do at a systems level to set people up for success, to strengthen your leadership pipeline? And I will not just give you theory, I'll try to give you something very practical that you can immediately implement. Let me start with this. Never promote an ask twice person, or an ask 3 times or 4 times or more than that person. Only ever promote an ask once person. What on earth do I mean by that? Well, you know how sometimes when you're a supervisor, you're leading people and you have to have the same conversation with them on multiple occasions. You ask them to do something differently. And then a month later, or maybe it's just a week later, they're sitting in your office with you again, or you're approaching them on the floor, and you have to tell them the same thing because they didn't make the change that you asked for. Well, the number one thing I'm looking for when it comes to who would do a good job if they got promoted is teachability. And for me, teachability could be defined abstractly in a lot of different ways. But fundamentally, what I'm looking at is if I can ask someone not just to do a task. So when I say ask twice or 3 times or more, I'm not so much thinking tasks. That matters. I mean, that matters. Reliability, let's just assume that you wouldn't even consider trying to promote someone who's not reliable. I think that's fair to say. You don't even get even in the consideration without that. But they're reliable. But there's a big difference between asking someone to do a task and then they can follow through. A very valuable skill, not to take away from that. But there's a big difference between that and someone where you can ask them to change something from how they have been doing it to how you need them to do it and how responsive they are to that change. To me, that's teachability in a nutshell. And so I'm looking for my ask once people. And if I was advising a manager or even an executive leader, how do you build your leadership team? How do you look for who's next to promote? That's literally the number one thing I would say is look for your ask once people, and specifically people that you can ask to change something one time, and then they are able to follow through on making that change. That says so much about who they are, that they're able to manage themselves appropriately, that they're able to enact change, that they're teachable. And to me, I would rather have someone teachable with a lot less skills than have someone who's got all the skills in the world but is not teachable. To me, that person, who knows what they're going to do? Because if you need anything different, they may or may not be able to actually make that change. Okay, so that's the first and primary thing I'm looking for. The second one matters a whole lot too, okay? And I'm looking for someone that's more of a thermostat than a thermometer. When they are around a group of people, are they influencing those around them? In other words, I'm looking at influence. Some people are setting the temperature of the room, and some people are just following the temperature of the room. Now, a quick disclaimer on this. I'm not meaning that they have to be the most charismatic personality. They don't even need to be an extrovert to be a good leader or a good frontline supervisor. But they need to not just be someone that completely follows the crowd. They need to be someone who is willing to set the tone or set the pace, or they're not that worried about what other people are thinking in that sense. So they're independent-minded in a sense, but then they also need to be someone who can influence others towards the way they're doing things. Some lead more by example, and some lead more with words. Ideally, you're going to have some combination of both. But I'm looking for someone who influences their peers. And to me, that is the top two criteria, is teachability and influence. In fact, if you could kind of picture this, if we were to say quadrants, okay, so the horizontal axis, we're going to call that influence. So to the left side, that is less influence. To the right side is more influence. And then on the vertical axis, if we said teachability, so on the bottom half, that's less teachable. And on the upper half, as it moves up, that person gets more and more teachable. You want to get people in that top right quadrant. Again, if you can hopefully picture this by how I'm painting the picture with my words, because they're both highly teachable and they have a lot of influence. Those are the people that absolutely are going to be the best candidates for promotion, who are going to be able to handle that well, even if they are missing some of the other skills, because that teachability piece is there. And influence, although it can be taught, it's ideal if someone comes with at least a moderate level of that. If you end up, sometimes what happens is, first of all, people might not be considering this at all, and people just get promoted for their reliability. But let's suppose that we are considering it. It's easy and tempting to promote that person who is highly teachable but has very little influence. They might be kind of like the teacher's pet. Now, I don't mean that to be demeaning, but they may not actually, there's no one following them. They're not influencing other people, but they'll follow everything you say. Well, that person is great to have on your team. In fact, they're often some of the highest performers on your team. But if they're missing that influence piece, that can really be a challenge then, because translating that into them being able to get other people to do things, their ability to delegate tasks effectively, to have those coachable moment conversations could be quite challenging. Now, if we go to the quadrant, that'd be this next one would be the lower right. This is someone that's got a lot of influence, but they're not real teachable. These are also tempting to promote or to put into leadership because they have a lot of influence. People naturally gravitate towards them and naturally follow them. However, if they're not real teachable, then what can happen is they might start leading their team in a whole different direction, or whenever you need to change something or have it go a certain way, they may or may not be on board with that. And so they can end up being kind of like a loose cannon. A lot of headaches are in that zone of trying to reel that person back in or trying to have them be more of the bigger team picture, team player. So that's why we're always looking for people in that top right quadrant that are both highly teachable and carry a lot of influence. Quick announcement. If you're an executive or an HR director at a human services agency and you want a stronger, more stable workforce, I want to invite you to a new series of free live sessions designed just for you. I'm collaborating with the Institute on Community Integration from the University of Minnesota, and we're launching the Direct Support Leadership Lens Strategies for a Stronger Workforce series. These are practical, interactive, and they're anchored in that, yeah, we've already tried everything to fix it feeling that many leaders experience. You can get the whole scoop and register. Just click the top banner at iddleader.com. Who do we promote, or how can we build a promotion system, a leadership pipeline? If I were to ask you on a scale of 1 to 10 right now, with 1 being not clear at all and 10 being very clearly defined, how clear is the client outcome measurements at your organization? For most people, it's going to be fairly clear. Let me ask you this. If I were to use the same scale from 1 not clear at all to 10 super clear, how clear are the compliance measurements that your organization uses? The chances are very high that you have a high number there, that there are some clear compliance measurements being used. Whether you've got more internal systems or you're simply just trying to follow all the regulations that your state puts forth, it's a lot. We know it's a lot in the field of human services. But now, let me ask you this, and you can kind of consider this one. If I were to ask, let's say, a dozen different supervisors at your agency, what are the 3 to 5 core leadership competencies that they need to display as a supervisor? Would they all provide the same answer? Probably not. In most agencies, they wouldn't. In other words, the second point is this. It's having clearly defined core leadership competencies or core leadership skills, and then they also need to be getting measured. This kind of just could sound like leadership mumbo jumbo, but let me play it out. If I'm really clear, I'll just give an example. What if we decided that at your agency, having that a core leadership skill is to underpromise and overdeliver? That's kind of easy to remember, and there's often a bent for people to overpromise. Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I'll take care of that, and then underdeliver. But what if it was a core leadership competency or skill to underpromise and overdeliver? What that would mean is that we really care about our word. When we say we're going to do something, we get it done. And often we get it done either better or faster than we say we're going to get it. There's a lot of sub skills that would be captured in that. But as soon as we have that and we say let's not set forth 20 core competencies. That's going to be way too many for anyone to remember or to have any meaningful conversations around. But if you just pick that as one of your 4, let's just say, if you had 4 core leadership competencies that you say, your organization, this defines the skills that we're looking for our supervisors. Then as soon as you have a supervisor who's not following through on literally anything, you can just immediately bring it back to, let's talk about this core competency. How's it going for you when it comes to under-promising and over-delivering? And probably at least, I don't know, a third or half of your supervisors, there's just a lot of people in the population where this is the case, where we say yes really easily and really quickly, and we don't always really mean yes. And so calling that out and saying, listen, at our organization, we're defining leadership in this way, that you underpromise and you overdeliver. So if you say you're going to get that done by Monday, first of all, you're absolutely going to get it done by Monday, but then you're actually going to try to get it done by Thursday or Friday from the week before. Do you see where I'm headed with this? What happens is when there's not clarity around what skills are being measured, a couple things are happening and then in the pipeline. It becomes very unclear on how could someone show leadership readiness. Now, I already gave you kind of a different framework for some promotion readiness, but if you're to break it down at the skill level, having clearly defined core competencies means that everybody in your whole organization, not even just your supervisor, but everybody knows these are the core skills of our supervisors. And then it also creates the conversation piece and the ongoing mentoring and coaching and training for leaders. So if someone promotes, let's just say, so I gave you the one about the under promise, over deliver. Let's just suppose that another core skill, core competency is to provide praise and frequent feedback. That all the supervisors, all the leaders of the organization, they need to be able to provide praise frequently. Behavior specific praise is even better because then you're saying specifically what someone did that was that was powerful, that modeled what we care about here. But praise and feedback. Then as soon as someone's promoted, we start to have this conversation every single time I'm meeting with them, if I'm their manager over this frontline supervisor. How's it going with providing feedback and praise to your team? Do they know what they're doing that's awesome? How would they know that? What are you doing to tell them? And starting to get into that as a core skill. Now, I know it sounds really easy, but just because it sounds easy doesn't mean it's happening a lot. And so often when there's the stressors of supervisors being pulled in a million different directions and they're having to do coverage and they're trying to make sure that everything's entered properly into your software for the billing and for case notes or however that works at your organization, and then they're pulled in different meetings, it's easy to forget that one of the most powerful things they can do is to look around their team, find someone that's doing something great, and call that out and say that, hey, I noticed that you handled when that person had that person had a complex behavioral need and you handled it really, really well. Or way to go on initiating that conversation with the parent who stopped by the house. I heard that you handled that really great. And that's what we want to do. We want to build a bridge between us and the families. Awesome. So that can become then not just something that is hopefully happening naturally, but it becomes, this is how we define good leadership here. And so often people get promoted and there wasn't even clear leadership training, or if there was, it was kind of this general idea about, well, we're going to learn about some personality types, or we're going to learn that we need to, model by example. Those both can be really valuable things. But what's measurable about that? Knowing someone's personality that isn't a measurable skill per se. But whether or not I'm giving frequent feedback and frequent praise, that is a measurable skill. In fact, you could have a simple checklist that I'm filling out every week about that. Not that we need one more checklist, but at the same time, if it doesn't get measured, if there isn't a checklist somewhere, is it really happening? Everything else in our field's getting checklists. All those compliance things I mentioned, client outcomes, and rightfully so, those things need checklists. They need to be getting checked on, but so do leadership skills. And what I've found when I work with agencies is that even just giving them the language of how would you at your agency define, let's just define a few key skills. What does a great supervisor look like? And not just like, oh, they're a good communicator, but break it down to some specific actual skills that then it becomes so much clearer on when there are performance deficits for a supervisor. What are they even supposed to be working on? What am I trying to coach them on if I'm the one managing them? And so this ends up being a really, really valuable, crucial skill. Now, let me just kind of, we'll take it here for just a moment. If you imagine for a moment that you have a supervisor who's struggling right now, maybe not, at their total wit's end, but they're struggling a bit. If you had to score them on their leadership, how would you score them? What would you score them on? Okay, there I go again. I'm getting at the same thing. If you had to pick one phrase or one word or couple words what comes to mind? And here's the kicker. Would everyone on your team have the same metrics, the same things that they're scoring them on? So what happens is if there's no shared framework within an organization, then we can identify the little fires that are burning. We can identify the stuck spots or the trouble spots. And we might be like, oh yeah, she over there, she's amazing. We know that her team always is doing great. They love working for her. It's awesome. Then we got this other guy over here, and there's a lot of turnover on his team. And it seems like there's just some stuff he's not really getting. Maybe he could just communicate better. Maybe we'll just send him to another leadership training or a supervisor training. Okay. But how much more valuable would it be if you simply had clearly defined core competencies or core skills that he should be displaying, particularly, and this is my bent, my passion, particularly as it relates to managing people, because that's where I see the biggest breakdowns. That's the same stuff that I do. We've got a leadership lab that's coming up here. It's a cohort with supervisors across multiple agencies. And we help foster those kinds of moments where supervisors realize, oh, that's a skill. I can learn a skill. I just kept feeling stressed out every time I was supposed to have a conversation about that strong personality person on my team who tends to show up 5 to 10 minutes late to work. So I don't know what to do, and then I eventually pull in the manager, and I don't know how to have that just a simple conversation. Boom, that could be a core competency that really matters, and that's the kind of stuff that I love coaching supervisors on, and helping to instill system-wide in agencies. So when those are defined, then it becomes so much clearer on who is displaying those skills, or who shows the aptitude to display those skills, and then they become an obvious choice for who would get the next supervisor opening when it becomes available. And there you go. That's how you can build your leadership pipeline in a really effective manner. Now, I always try to leave you with at least one action item. Here's my action item for you today. Kind of going back to those 4 quadrants, right? On the one axis, we've got teachability. The other axis is influence. If you were to just take all of your current supervisors at your organization, or just the people on your team, if you're already a leader of leaders, and put their name down in whichever quadrant fits. And you can kind of put it closer to the middle if it's closer to the middle, or closer to way out to one side or the other if that's more appropriate. But that would take probably, 5 minutes to draw a vertical line and a horizontal line, right? Horizontal line, influence, vertical line, teachability. And kind of just put each supervisor, what do you see with them? And then also, if there's a couple people that are on the radar for possible future supervisors that might be promoting, put them on there as well. I think you'll get a lot of insight if you do that exercise. All right. Well, I don't ever want you to miss out on all the exciting things like the webinar, or it's not really the live session that we're having, about to have here today, later today. We have another one coming up in May. I don't want you to miss out on anything. So if you want to keep up to speed on what's going on, you can go to iddleader.com and actually have a free resource. If you just do iddleader.com/burnout, it's a resource to show how supervisors are accidentally burning out their teams. And then it comes with solutions like, well, what can you do? If this is the issue that's happening, what can you do about it? If they're avoiding tough conversations, what's an easy way to start to fix that? So if you want, you can check that out for free, and get that resource, or just sign up on the bottom footer. And I send out a weekly newsletter that I tend to hear a lot of really positive, encouraging feedback. It is encouraging. I tend to try to be really encouraging, but just tips, tidbits, things I'm learning on this journey of how can we have the best org on the block? How can this be an awesome place to work? Keep a strong, stable workforce. We've got some exciting guests coming up soon in upcoming episodes, so I know that you'll probably really enjoy that. And until next time, here's to you. Keep up the amazing work.